Hello, good evening and welcome to UPfront. My name is Raymond Aqua. My guest today is a man of very vast military, security, peacekeeping, and extraordinary intelligence experience. You need to have a look at his CV, right from serving in the Ghanaian military in the sub-region, also taking up so many roles at the UN level, and also being in charge of so many high-level security operations. Col.Rtd Aboagye, retired, is my guest. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
I hope you're doing well this day.
By God's grace.
I'm pleased to have you here.
I'm also grateful to be here.
We'll do this conversation, but before then, let's take a break. After this break, we'll connect on the most important issues in the country about security, first and foremost. With your ending conversations on bringing back our tardy girls, what have we done wrong and how can we correct that? We'll put that in the perspective that you should know about, that this year, the first 3 months of this year, has the highest kidnapping cases since 2014. Why is that happening? What can we do about it? Is the crux of our conversation. Later on, our churches threatened to the bone, mindful of what's happening in the sub-region, especially in Burkina Faso. What can be done about that situation too? Are we counter-terrorism ready? That's a question that we want to chew on. After the break, we'll continue to converse on that. Welcome back. This is UPfront. My name is Raymond Aqua. I did tell you that my guest is an extraordinary military man, a man of higher intelligence when it comes to peace, security, and all the related facts in this case. Col.Rtd Aboagye, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
I hope you're doing well.
By God's
Some
grace.
put B in your name. What does it stand for?
Boahin.
Oh, okay. So,
Boahin.
okay, wonderful. Yeah.
That's
Now,
right.
I want us to start from what's more like the current issues in the country. The first one is the Col.Rtd girls that went missing last year. In August this year, it will be exactly 1 year since the first girl went missing. Since then, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not we are in the process of retrieving them. We've seen them. We may likely see them. In fact, the police even came out to say that every conversation about they being identified and being brought home anytime soon is pure fake news. The family is worried about whether or not there's a lot of talk about how to get them, and yet we don't have them. There's also a general concern about kidnapping cases in the country. Now, the figures from the police suggest that from January to March this year is the highest in the last 5 years. That's 30 kidnap cases reported to the police. Now, to be clear, all of these 30, the rate at which we'll be able to reunite the people who have been kidnapped with the families is being very low. Over the years, there's a similar request on that particular plate. So kidnapping, perhaps we went to sleep, but it's been an issue now. Have we had a recent lax insecurity? Or there is some wave of kidnapping that comes once in a while that we are currently being part of?
Thanks for the question. I think we need to be a bit more careful in how analyze the information that you've just provided. We make the case that we've been a bit lax. Then we must have a benchmark position where we can argue that this was the level of security that prevailed in the country about a year ago, and owing to some circumstances, we've been a bit lax.
Okay.
It's a bit difficult to prove that.
Okay.
It may be, as you've also alluded to, that it's an emerging threat, security threat. It's got its own dynamics and its own trends. So whilst we may not, as a society, as a country, have taken due note of kidnapping, the increasing numbers patterns and trends of kidnapping might have taken us a bit unawares, a bit unprepared, being a bit deficient in the kinds of human intelligence that we could have deployed if that had been on our radar, or the electronic intelligence, signal intelligence, and so on and so forth. So I would argue that rather than saying that we've been a bit lax, the reality could very well be that this is a new trend that is spiraling, I wouldn't want to say out of control, but increasing at an alarming rate.
I see.
And therefore, the important thing is for the state security agencies to be up and running, up and doing, and putting in place the necessary mechanisms and structures, to try, first of all, to arrest, to contain, and then, if you like, to now reduce it to the barest possible minimum.
Interesting. Now, in your seat, Emmanuel Bombande, who is currently somewhere in the UN office, has said that he believes that the recent problems with security falls in one category. One, there seems to be some confusion at the top about security coordination. So there is a minister of state in charge of national security. There is a minister substantive in charge of national security. There is also some national security coordinators, advisors, and a lot of them in place. He says mostly you put the coordination of national security in the hands of a non-partisan person, somebody who is always minded to put the nation first. And that because of that seeming lack of clarity and also distortion up there, it sends some waves down the security system in the way that there's no proper coordination. He starts from Maya also, moves on to the hearing that happened in the case and all of that, and establishes that until we're able to fine-tune our current system or revert to previous systems where somebody at the apex of security is a national security coordinator, whose business is to coordinate all of the other various institutions and work properly at that level, we may still be struggling to deal with some of these problems. Do you find that diagnosis reflecting the situation?
I think it's a cogent view that is taken. The instructive experiences in the security domain or intelligence domain is that the more the number of units and centers of intelligence that a state has, the more likely that there is going to be a bit of turf war.
Okay.
Some units not being very ready to share intelligence, to share information, and therefore you're going to get gaps in the bigger intelligence picture. I think that is the kind of narrative that we find ourselves in. We may have thought that, as you've said, by appointing X number of ministers of security, Minister of State for Security, besides the National Security Coordinator and so on, we have more or less enhanced our security posture. That may not be the case. It may very well be that the multiplicity of these intelligence actors itself is creating a bit of this lacuna. And of course, we need to admit as a people that some of the appointments that you've mentioned, with the exception of the National Security Coordinator, which is constitutionally based, the rest are partisan, political appointments. Yes, they may be educated, they may have the experience, but in the intelligence world especially, you need actors who are intelligence savvy, who have the experience, and who are not hamstrung by partisan political calculations.
Okay.
You say, to be able to impact on the national security environment. So I would agree with Honorable Bombande to a very large extent. And as you suggested, Ayawaso was an eye-opener, where it was very obvious that certain ministries that were responsible, first of all, for internal security, before layering it with national security, didn't appear to know exactly what was happening. And the leaked report of the Emil Short Commission alludes to that.
Yes.
So you end up with gaps when you have multiple structures, each handling intelligence, but with very weak coordinating mechanisms.
I see. Now, that's instructive. Can we fix it?
Oh, it can be fixed. We should all be students of history. In the aftermath of the 9/11,
yeah,
that was one of the findings that the U.S. intelligence community realized, that there was intelligence, but the coordination of it was not what it should have been. So in fixing it, we need to streamline the structure.
Recently, even in Sri Lanka, I think that the states made a similar...
where the prime minister vis-a-vis the president, vis-a-vis the chief of defense staff or whoever, police commissioner, are all arguing as to who had it and who shared it or who didn't share it. So the streamlining is very, very important, with clear channels of command control communication, with clearly defined levels of decision making, you say, so that at each level, each officer, each operator knows exactly what steps he or she can take and what it is that must be passed up the chain. So it can be fixed. But having said all of this, we need to address the political environment in which national security institutions have found themselves. Even if you fix it, for instance, properly, and the handling of security intelligence issues are or is politicized, then we may have the facts, but what we put out in the public domain may not be the whole truth. And therefore, certain actors may not be able to take the appropriate actions.
But by this case, how we'll deal with it will also be problematic. So by the certain actors, the people who are supposed to act may not be clear in their minds what exactly they are supposed to do in this case.
They may be clear, but every individual in whatever office he or she finds himself always goes through a bit of calculations, the risk to their own integrity, the risk to their careers, and so on and so forth. So for the Ayawaso case, for instance, those who were in the know, those who were handling the issues professionally, knew what ought to have been done. But obviously, for political reasons and for personal reasons, didn't do what was required. So that political element in which you situate intelligence and security is very, very important.
Can we remove partisan political considerations entirely from security setups?
Not necessarily entirely. One of the issues that we need to grapple with, you've already mentioned it, that rather than appointing political or politically connected individuals to hold certain positions, look for persons with requisite expertise and knowledge, subject matter knowledge, and put them in those positions. Of course, you hold them accountable, and they themselves must act professionally. I think if we can, remove partisan party political influences from the security architecture that we have, that itself would have created a certain environment within which the system will begin to correct itself.
I.e., don't appoint a national security minister.
Well, if the Constitution says it's not necessary, then it's not necessary. Because in society, you have what is legally provided for and what in the army we call traditions. So as a people, we have allowed ourselves to embark on a culture or tradition of thinking and believing that partisan party political oversight of every institution is what will deliver the goods. And that's not the case. You see it. So we should...
Because there's a belief that sometimes the existing institution might not appreciate the exigencies, might not appreciate the thinking of the current leadership in a way that will deliver the goals required. Again, they say the buck stops with the executive president, and that delivery on these goals, including security, is the ultimate responsibility of that executive president.
It is.
So you would want to put in people you trust, you believe can deliver on these goals without doubt. Is that a sufficient reason why?
No, it's not sufficient reason. See, you can make yourself believe in anything you want to believe in. And I'll give you one example. For the armed forces, especially, much less the police, we have had instances where chiefs of defense staff have served across different political party governments and leadership. But we cannot fault any one of those chiefs, or service commanders for that matter, that because they were put in place by the government prior, their allegiance was to that government or that president. See, in other words, we're looking at the professionalism of an institution. So if you remove party politics, let's say from the police, then you can hold the police to account solely on the basis of professional standards. The moment you add politics to the mix, then you're creating other benchmarks, some of which are not quantifiable. You see?
That's interesting, because even the current conversation on who becomes the IGP, some have speculated that the most important consideration is loyalty to the president and somebody who is known and can be deemed to have some party political links. And beyond that, really, they are all police people at COP levels.
No. On the surface of that argument, it makes sense. Yeah. But if you analyze it professionally, it doesn't make sense. You might not know, but South Africa has a certain culture or tradition of advertising certain levels of appointments or officers in the South African police service.
I see.
So, for instance, forgetting the gentleman's name, it's put out, and you apply, and then you are appointed. They don't appoint career police officers to become national commissioners, as they call them, which is the equivalent
of the IGP.
Yes, that's the equivalent of our IGP. They don't appoint, they don't appoint career officers. You see. So that is the system. Yeah. But here, we have a system where career police officers rise through the different levels or ranks or grades and get up there. So if I heard multimedia correctly, there are about 10 top commissioners of police.
That's true.
They have different seniorities. One of them, by virtue of service seniority, will be the most senior.
Yeah.
That's one factor you need to take into consideration. Then if you like the army, we have executive, non-executive, we have T-farm and non-T-farm. The T-farm will be the combat units. So you're talking of infantry, you're talking of armored recce, you're talking of engineers, you're talking of signals. You see it. When you get to the top, the level of the generals, normally you don't factor that in. But nonetheless, is one of the factors that needs to be considered. What is the professional background in terms of the service or arm of service of that commissioner of police? You see it. If you're a commissioner of police who has virtually handled administrative matters, you see what I mean? As opposed to a commissioner of police who has been through the intelligence, criminal investigation, you know, the regular policing, that necessarily must be a factor.
I see.
Then the expertise that you are bringing. So when you're hearing of, excuse my language because that was in the media, you hear of Kwesifori.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? You trace his background, and he was in Kumasi as a regional police commander.
Kofi
Boakye.
Yeah.
Or you hear of Kwesi Fori currently as the Accra, whatever operations, and they're all material. You see what I mean? Because each position that a police officer holds redounds with a lot of expertise, professional expertise to that individual. So, bottom line, you may have 10 commissioners of police, but you narrow it down, you shortlist, and maybe 3 should be the names that go, call it the police council. Not all 10. You see what I mean? All 10 because we have lowered the bar and brought in, if you like, newly promoted, newly appraised commissioners.
Yes.
You know. But a newly promoted commissioner of police definitely wouldn't have the same level of professional competence of a commissioner of police who has held that rank for about 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is. See.
Will you be shocked if the political elements prevails upon all of these professional and extraordinary competencies that people may have?
We won't be surprised because as a people, that is how we want to manage our own affairs. And I'm speaking, yes, I'm speaking on a platform, you know, where we need to be a bit more objective. A few years ago, a good friend of mine, Lieutenant General, or was he Major General? Who do say? Richard.
Okay, yeah.
Who was then commanding, currently the Central Command, then the Northern Command, was made the Chief of Army Staff or the Army Commander. Now, his intake seniority was or is less than that of Lieutenant General Aboagye, who was assigned to the Kofi Annan Center. And within retired officers circles, got 7 officers normally don't talk much.
Yeah.
You know the implications.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. But amongst us who are retired, you'll be wondering, why was Major General Aboagye not appointed the Army Commander? Why did the government descend about 2 intakes down to pick a new Army Commander? Now, because I'm a student of military history, you know, I've observed that even if that government made a mistake, it self-corrected itself. Because before it left office, that's the previous administration,
yes,
General Akwa was made the Army Commander. I moved from Kofi Annan Center to Army Headquarters to become the CDS. You see, that is what we expect to happen. Yes, unless that officer is absolutely useless. But if an officer is absolutely useless at that level, then the system has failed. So at that level, plus or minus, they are all competent. Yeah. You see what I mean? And any one of them should be able to hold that office and perform with hardly any political calculations. But our history shows, and I've just observed a very interesting dynamic. So I've just done a paper on military ambassadors.
Yeah.
So before Nkrumah left office, there was hard intelligence. I think the director of military intelligence was Colonel Ojija. I stand to be corrected. But Colonel Ojija generated an intelligence report which went to Major General Bawa. And in that report, Kutuka was mentioned as planning something. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, the record shows that Kutuka went to the office of General Bawa blasting to the extent that General Bawa invited Colonel Ojija and asked him to withdraw that report. In other words, null and void. Now, what happened?
It happened, actually.
It happened.
Yeah.
And when it happened, or before it happened, Ankara,
yes,
and Lieutenant General SJA Otu had been retired.
Yeah.
Some say dismissed. So they were no longer in service. But come the NLC, you say,
yeah.
What happened?
They brought back. Major
General or Lieutenant General SJO2 couldn't be reinstated, but he was appointed an ambassador. And then Ankara was reinstated and made chairman of the National Liberation Council. At the time that they were doing that, Major General N.A. Aferi, or Lieutenant General, who was attending an OAU summit in Addis Ababa, and pronounced himself publicly, look, this is my position. I support this change in government. Nonetheless, he was retired and appointed an ambassador to Mexico and Venezuela. You see it. So there is nothing to show that if you had left a ferry in place, a ferry would have undermined the NLC. But you see, given a ferry's association with the CPP, it makes sense, humanly speaking, to get rid of him. So over the years, that is what has been happening. Yeah. When there is a change of government, certain officers within these institutions, police, military, through no fault of theirs, just simply because they found themselves sitting in certain seats, are retired.
At a point in time.
At a point in time. They are retired because it was the government that is leaving that appointed them, and therefore we can draw question marks against their names. You see it.
I get
but
you.
General Obedakwe's experience actually shows that it's all political calculations without too much merit.
That's interesting.
You see what I mean?
Now, I want to bring you to this question. If you have sat from afar and seen and observed the handling of these missing girls matter, specifically the Col.Rtd girls, how do you evaluate how State Ghana security institutions have handled this matter?
I'm a bit quiet because I spoke a few days ago on Star FM in response to the Atinka
interview by CID boss.
The boss of CID. And the feedback was not... I thought that I was being a bit objective. I wouldn't say that I'm completely objective. But the whole idea is that, first of all, the handling of the professional aspects of the criminal investigation have been undermined to the extent that the suspect could break jail, escape from whatever cell, and implicate a police officer or whatever prison officer in his breakout. That's true. It completely undermines the integrity of that authority. And since then, all the leads have dried up. The best lead, at least for those of us in the public domain, that we had was when he led the authorities to a certain uncompleted building where they found some clothes and so on. Now, either the guy is not talking, might have sworn some oath of allegiance to his network or gang, so he's refused to talk. Or we probably are not asking the correct questions or the right questions. So for us in the public domain, it looks like the case has gone cold, to borrow that terminology from DSTV, criminal, what do you call it, ID?
Cold cases.
Yes, that kind of stuff. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is that because this is a case of severe interest to the public, there has to be a public information dimension to keep the public informed, especially the families, as to what it is that the police, working with BNI and so on, are doing and that kind of stuff. That we've not handled very well. Look, even if on a daily basis there is no information to give to the families, that is still information. We realized a few days ago, when the police was saying that they had appointed or designated police liaison officers for the families, it turned out that that was not the truth. That's true. It was only when the issue was hyped that the police regional commander, my good friend, I've forgotten his name, led the liaison officers to establish rapport with the families. So that handling has not been good. Then you have what you've cited, that there is a difference between public information and psychological operations. I've said that from day one.
Okay.
This is a case for public information. Public information is about facts. Telling the population or your audiences what it is that you know, or what it is that you don't know, what it is that you are doing, and what your estimate is as to how much progress you are making. It calls for precision in the choice of words. And that was a remark I made on Star FM, that especially in the criminal investigation domain, words mean a lot. So we know where the girls are, connotes a certain idea that you have narrowed down. Instead of us being blank, absolutely blank, you have narrowed down the geographical domain of where the girls are. They might be in the country, they might be outside of the country, they might be in the West African region, or a country within the West African region, or they may be further afield in Europe, across oceans and so on. That is what I think the police authorities should have told us.
Okay.
Simply that we are still engaged with this issue. We are working with other security agencies, including the BNI and so on and so forth. We need time to unravel this mystery. Then, lo and behold, Daily Guide it was.
Yes, Daily Guide.
Quoted or stated emphatically
they've been found. They were at a military hospital facility.
They had been transported from Western region to Accra. Yes. BNI this, BNI that.
Yeah.
Then some hours later, police says, no, we are not aware.
Complete fake
And
news.
I argue that the police CID would have deny that information or, withdrawn from it or distance themselves only after coordination with BNI.
I see.
And therefore, when the police said they didn't know where the girls were, it invariably implied that what the Daily Guide story was alleging was not true. Mm-hmm. And strangely enough, police has not found it necessary, given all the discourses that we're having around people making certain statements. At least I'm not aware that the news editor of Daily Guide had been invited by the police to go and give a statement and explain the basis of that statement.
No, they just dismissed it through the statement they issued.
But that's not sufficient. Is it sufficient? If I should, I don't like asking host questions. But it's not sufficient.
I will believe. But
see, given the gravity of this kidnapping, abduction cases, Daily Guide has a responsibility to answer to the police for that statement. In fact, you can stretch the case. I'm not a legal mind.
Yeah.
But they have caused, or they caused panic. You see, they affected the public psyche. Mm-hmm. And therefore, they have a case to answer. Unless you are aware, I'm not aware, that the news editor of Daily Guide or the editor of Daily Guide has been invited by the police to put this matter to rest. So all of this adds to the confusion around the handling of the case. And I've said that we need to reset, recalibrate, and move forward. But we've learned, or we should learn, some experiences from the management of the information alone. I think that our CID, or our police, is working with the International Criminal Police Organization, which is Interpol.
Really?
I think, Because unless they can say that the girls are still in the country, then maybe they don't need Interpol assistance. But once the girls leave the boundaries of Ghana, you need the ICPO or the Interpol and their branch within the West African region, you know, to collaborate with and see whether you can, you know, get to the bottom of this case.
The conversation we are having today, do you think that any Ghanaian, and even those of us in the media, and also more important, their family, can put premium on any information the CID gives them?
Against the backdrop of what we've discussed, it will be a bit difficult. So we need the police organization to redeem its image and its integrity, so that going forward, that trust and confidence can be reposed, you know, within the police organization. But given all that we know currently, I don't think anybody will take what the police tells us as seriously as you know, we should have taken their statements.
Should the higher authority be communicating for the police? For example, the Ministry of Interior. Should somebody with some form of higher authority, believable higher authority, be the ones in charge of the communication on this matter?
Some of them have done that already. The Minister for Gender.
Yes. But that was equally as symbolic,
very categorical.
Yes.
That, you know.
But that's the gender minister here. Well, the gender minister is not in charge of the police.
She's a minister nonetheless.
I get the point. My point here is that should the Ministry of Interior, for example, that is known to superintend the police and its activities, be the ones telling us that we are ultimately responsible for this matter and this is what we are doing directly on it?
It could be done.
Okay.
In order now to take the heat from the police.
Okay.
And then also for some degree of political responsibility to be taken.
Okay, yeah.
And I suspect that one reason why we have not heard too much about the political authorities pronouncing themselves on this matter is that they don't want to shoot themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
Because there could be cost.
So even the executive president spoke on the matter, not on this kidnapped girls matter, but said kidnapping is a problem. We put together a very important security structure to deal with it. Nothing specifically to do with what is happening in the attempts to get these girls back home.
Well, I saw a bit of that clip in the news.
Yes.
And the commentary that I heard subsequently, including on Newsfile, if I'm not mistaken, last Saturday was that. See, the platforms that authorities take or select to pronounce themselves on certain issues is part of the benchmarks for gauging how seriously they take certain issues.
That's true.
If you had a group of, who were they? Were they chiefs or some civil society visiting you? It more or less becomes a side issue. That in your interactions with the civil society groups, you chip that in, or they asked you and then you pronounce yourself. It is different from coming to the media.
Holding a press conference.
Holding a press conference, inviting the media, the families and so on, and making that serious pronouncement, including the commitment and the will politically to address this issue.
That's what the president should do?
Well, it could have been done. It would have helped to achieve Commissioner Mami Tiwa's objective of enhancing public confidence or giving the public hope. If the president speaks, or the Minister for National Security or Minister for Interior speaks, it carries more weight than the professional head of the IGP. Of the CID. Of course, one would expect that the IGP himself could also throw his weight into the equation. That there is need, more or less, to reduce the pressure that the CID Director General finds herself in now.
Okay.
But it will come with a cost, and that cost will be that it could be political, or it could be professionally against the office of the IGP. So, bottom line, some of your respondents have said that there was no need, including this morning on Metro, and I think on TV3, there was no need whatsoever for the Director General of CID to have come to make the statement that it made some weeks ago.
I will ask you about how best we can deal with that position. For a second, let me take a break. After this break, continue our conversation on UPfront here. My guest is the distinguished Colonel Festus Aboagye. He has extraordinary competence in security matters in the state. You're welcome back. This is UPfront. My name is Raymond Akwa. The conversation we are having with Colonel Festus Aboagye is to be able to properly triangulate the problem with kidnapping in the country, move on to narrow down the specific issue to do with the Col.Rtd kidnapped girls and how best we can handle that situation. When we have the conversation, that drives in a specific direction on how the communication can be handled going forward. Now, there are those, and there's been many of those comments, including some coming from the minority, others coming from civil society groups, who are saying that to restore hope in the current quagmire that the police find itself, at least the CID boss ought to be made to step aside or relinquish that position so that anybody else occupying the position will be deemed to be trustworthy of the kind of pronouncements they make in this matter. Is that a position worthwhile?
It may be. But it's all a question of national culture or national characteristic. As a people, we are not used to resigning from offices or positions that we hold, no matter how deep we dig ourselves into any mud.
Yeah, at least there'll be some example, one or two of them. We know of the Jifar Tibo case. We know recently that Roxy Bukari equally resigned from office.
They are the exceptions.
Okay, they are the exceptions.
They are not the norm.
Yeah, I see.
The norm should have been that individuals, as well as the appointing authorities, should either give them push if they don't resign. So,
should it happen in this case?
Well, I've heard the arguments, both politically and, let me say, technically. And those proponents of the resignation, you know, base their arguments on public confidence in the institution of the police. Is what I mean. But of course, the resignation of an individual would not necessarily mean that public confidence would, you know, be repaired. But at least it creates a new page. It brings new persons with different perspectives, probably insights, new dynamics or drives, you know, to drive this way forward. So if she chooses to resign, fine. If the president chooses to ask her to resign, that is fine. But the national interest is what we should have in mind.
I see.
Because beyond the police, we have nothing. The armed forces is not enrolled, you know,
take charge of
to do the kind of work that the police does. So public confidence in the police is of utmost importance. Maybe we can give her a second chance to redeem herself. But having said that, finding the girls is not a rocket science.
Really?
Yes. It requires a lot of intelligence, and intelligence is both a science and an art. It entails an element of luck to come across a piece of information that leads to, you know, the unraveling of this case. But as I've tried to suggest, I am convinced, I'm sure, I'm certain that the national authorities are working with other international actors, including, for instance, the United States and other governments, you know, who have been our traditional partners in the domain of intelligence and national security. Because I cannot vouch how much intelligence that these other actors might be sharing with the government. I see. But kidnapping entails a lot of planning. Those that we have quickly unraveled were more or less freelance kidnappers.
Yeah.
They were not experts. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So you grab a woman by the bush side, then you say, make a call, whatever it is, you know.
Yeah.
The experts know how to go about the game.
Okay.
You know, to drive people behind high-rise walls. Okay. You know, they know how to put out communications and so on and so forth. But also then there is an element of luck
in there.
In all investigative work. Okay. And if that luck is not forthcoming that easily, then the technical work of investigations probably would be a bit prolonged. But I'm sure that they...
Soon?
Pardon?
Will we get the girls anytime soon?
It's a bit difficult to speculate.
Yeah.
It is only the police or the national intelligence institutions that can tell us. And what they will tell us will be based on the quality, the nature of the intelligence that they have.
Do we have the competence to be able to unravel this situation so far exhibited?
You know, institutional capacities or building institutional capacities is always work in progress. So one government after the other, the police, for instance, has been tooled, retooled, whatever it is. As I'm aware that currently our security setup has received some communication gadgets to monitor communications.
Yeah.
Now, whether it is with a bench warrant or court warrant or what, I cannot tell.
Okay.
But if our democracy is what it is, then of course the gadgets will be there. But no individual can have the liberty of monitoring your communications. They need to go to a court of law and produce the justification for that court now to grant the permission. But those kinds of gadgets are available. For all you know, your WhatsApp message or WhatsApp messaging is not as secure as what do you think?
Interesting to know.
You see what I mean?
I get you.
But it's like finding a needle in a haystack. If you look at all the communications that are going on, you know, so the protocols revolve around certain keywords. That is why the criminals do not use certain words. Okay. They find their own code words.
I see.
So when I say good morning, between the two of us, we know what we are talking about.
All right. I see.
You see what I mean? To make it very difficult for those technologies to be able to find words like attack, bomb, you know, that kind of stuff. They will find other ways using code words or nicknames to communicate.
I'm spiraling over and I'm trying to quickly join this part because of what you just spoke about. There is the Africa Center for Security and Intelligence reports, which is suggesting that we are not that safe. And that groupings like the Salafi jihadist group in Burkina Faso may spiral over into Ghana and more likely attack churches like they've done in that country. Credible intelligence, what can we do about it?
Well, I came across that organization's statement, which has gone viral, if I should say, on social media, of course in the traditional media. First of all, I don't think that organization said that their intelligence, you said, but centers like that organization would have access to certain other sources. For instance, Africa Confidential. If you subscribe to it,
true. I do.
You find more information than you would otherwise find. So you take a source from Africa Confidential, You take it from Defense Web.
Yeah.
You take it from normal media, open sources. The work of the analyst is now to put all the pieces of information together and build a certain picture. And on the basis of that picture, to put out some kinds of projections and extrapolations.
Okay.
So what that institution was saying was that they were extrapolating, you know. I know for a fact that the national authorities are very much aware of the situation as it is evolving within the immediate
sub-region.
Yes,
within the sub-region. Are we working towards it?
That's a different question.
Do you
I'm also aware
so?
that our security presence on our northern borders, you know, has been enhanced. But the nature of that enhancement, I cannot tell you.
I see.
Whether it is human presence, whether it is electronic presence.
Do we have what it takes to deal with this situation?
That's what I'm trying to suggest. This is not rocket science.
Yeah.
But as long as you put in place all the different pieces of the strategy, then you hope that the strategy is going to deliver.
Are we on the right track?
I would want to believe that we're on the right track. But it doesn't mean that we can actually stop the southward flow of jihadism or terrorism. We may be able to contain it for a while. There may be slip-throughs because one of us may go to bed, or we may miss a certain signal. We may not invest as much finances into acquiring the appropriate gadgets and deploying very well-trained individuals, very well-trained within the intelligence setup.
So it's bound to happen?
It may happen, it may not happen. Indeed, as I was talking about this platform, I drew the analogy that the fact that Ghana has not been a victim of too many terrorist incidents might suggest that our intelligence setup is working. Well, it may very well be the case.
I guess I have to leave it off here. Forgive me, I'm told I've run out of time.
You're welcome,
but I appreciate you coming in today. It's been exhilarating and informing in this particular engagement. But thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, please.
Well, folks, my guest in this conversation was Col.Rtd Aboagye, extraordinary security expert, and you heard him. Thank you for joining us.